right, so we're just going to do a quick little flow, about 15 minutes or so, to help with some outer hip tightness and actually just general overall hip tightness. So the only thing you're going to need is some space and yourself. No props necessary for this. So oftentimes when we have some hip pain, it could just be an imbalance of what's going on within the pelvis or the low back. So we're gonna hit everything kind of 360 degrees. So we'll start with some movement, and then we'll move on to some stretching and things like that. So go ahead and come onto your back. And we're just gonna start with feet flat on the mat and tucking the shoulder blades just gently underneath of you. Arms can rest by your sides. We're gonna come to some pelvic tilts. And with the pelvic tilting here, it's really good to note that it's not an over-exaggeration of movement. It's just going to be a very small, subtle rocking of the pelvis. So bringing the hands to the hip bones, close the eyes, and just take a couple breaths to settle into the body. Feeling the back of the body start to meet the mat in a more softer way. Feeling the shoulders connect, just any kind of residual tension in the jaw, the neck, the shoulders, just let it start to soften into the mat. And then with those hands placed on the pelvis, just begin to imagine in your mind's eye this pelvis like a bowl of water. And so you have the rim of the pelvis, which is outlined by your pubic bone, your hip bones, and the navel. And that bowl of water is just steady and still right now in your neutral pelvic position. We're going to begin to rock the water a little bit in the bowl. So exhale, we're going to go and drop into 12 o'clock. So that's where I slightly curl my tailbone under, press my low back into the mat gently. And then to 6 o'clock, just gently tilt the tailbone forward. There's going to be a little arch in the low back there. And we'll just continue here for a couple rounds. And remember, it's not a major big movement. So not working within your particular range of motion. It's this gentle kind of ebb and flow. And if you can even imagine in your mind's eye, that water just rolling from one side of the bowl to the other, just slowly, not making waves, just little undulations of the water rocking back and forth. We're going to keep this slow here and just begin to notice the quality of your knees through this movement, making sure that we're not gripping in the quads or the glutes, and we're not pressing into the knees too much. The feet should be relaxed. And then finally, just coming to a nice, comfortable, steady, still position. So right back into neutral. And then instead of taking the water back and forth and that undulating movement, we're going to go side to side. So gently drop the right hip in towards the mat. You're going to feel that left hip bone kind of skew up to the ceiling, and then switch and switch. And just continue to rock around here. And just notice my knees, if you can, they're not moving too much. It's really this isolated pelvic movement, low spinal movement. It feels kind of good. This one can be a little bit more tricky to find. So just keep rocking the pelvis side to side. And it's as if that shift of the water is going back and forth laterally, right? So instead of just tilting forward and back like we were before, we're going side to side with the pelvis. And what's nice about these movements is that I encourage the slow pace. And I know for some of us that might be really hard, but the slower you move, the more you can tap into the intricacies of the muscles that are needed to fire in order to make this movement happen. All right, so now find yourself into center. We're going to take that water and go all the way around. So we're going to pretty much be going in a clockwise position with the pelvis. And so what does that mean to you? Go ahead and find it. Thinking about those markers that we had in the front and back, right? So we had that 6 and 12 where we were at 12 o'clock, that low back was pressing into the mat. And then down at 6, the low back was arching and the tail was pressing. And then if you want to think about your right and your left sides of your hips being like 9 and 3,
And just kind of, it's completely personal up to you. Don't worry about exactly which side is 9 and which side is 3. Just notice that clock-like swirl in your pelvis. We'll do one more here, and probably just as you got the rhythm going, go ahead and switch sides, switch directions, that is. And notice if this direction tends to be a little bit more difficult to access. And usually it is, because we want to go with our preferred range of motion first, even if it's subconscious. As I said, I cued clockwise, right? I always cue clockwise first. So, 2 more here, just circle around. And then find complete stillness. Rest your arms by your sides, pause. Begin to bring the awareness to your thigh bones, so the upper parts of the upper thigh. And then if you can imagine in your mind's eye, those thigh bones just dropping gently deeper down into the hip sockets. And this just creates a more engaged and rooted quality of the thighs. Two more breaths here. We want to be careful of overusing the upper thigh muscles and hip muscles when we come into this. So slowly tabletop one leg, so one leg into right over the hip, and then the other. And you're going to bring your hands to those knees, and then you're going to make big circles with the knees. Now they're opening up in opposite direction, and so you're not actually guiding the legs with your hands. They're just kind of there for support. You should feel this action and this movement coming from your low belly. So if you feel like you're tilting and arching the back a little too much, really commit into keeping the neutral pelvis and then using your abdominals to stabilize the pelvis as you stir the legs around. Okay, we have 2 more in this direction, so they're moving opposite from one another, and then we're going to bring them in and out. And then same thing here. We're trying to really recruit on the low abdominals to support us so that you can still keep the upper thigh muscles unencumbered. So they're moving, they're working, but they're not the primary source of effort here. Our core is. Okay, last 2. And then 1. Now place the left foot down, hug the right knee in. And then take that left leg and just reach it long down the mat. And from here you can point and flex the right toes. Without forgetting about that left leg, just remember that we want it to remain heavy and just kind of rooted down into the mat. It's not making any movement or holding any tension. And then let's just start to stir that right thigh in the hip socket. And now I am actually guiding the leg with my hand. So I've got this interlaced clasp of my hands around the shin. And instead of me actually using the leg and core to move this leg, I'm using my hand to stir the legs. Okay, 1 more big breath here. And then reverse your circles. And so just feeling that kind of easefulness in the psoas. And if you're not quite sure what the psoas is, it's that deep hip flexor muscle, but sometimes we often feel its tension in the kind of side abs, low abs. Now pause here, and then take that right arm, reach it out. You're going to take your left hand to the outside of that right thigh, and then just do a little twist here. So now this will primarily stretch that glute and low back. Don't overdo it, especially in the beginning here. Just kind of let your body soften into this opening. And notice I've kept my knee bent here, and I do have my left hand on that outer right thigh. Now that's something that you can maintain. And just depending on how you're feeling in your hip and glute, you might stay here, or you might begin to extend that leg out long and then finding a support for it. So I didn't set myself up, I had said earlier, we don't need any props or anything for this. So I'm actually using my left hand and I'm clasping onto my calf just to support here. We want to avoid feeling this over pull through this band part of the back here. So this is the area of the sacrum, the SI joint. So I want to keep the stretch primarily in this glute and outer thigh, outer hip area. So listen to your body. You might have to pull it back a little bit, or you might have to send your left hip, kind of pick it up, and then send it back a little bit so that you're more stacked in the hips here. All right, 2 more breaths. Just let that right arm freely kind of just open out to the right. And then from here, we'll slowly unwind. Just be very mindful of what you were feeling in your low back here. And then extend that right leg long, nice and slow. And then we'll come into hugging the left in. So same thing here. We're going to guide this left leg in those circles using the strength of our arms. So I've got my fingers interlaced, hands clasped over that left shin, just above or just below the left knee. And then after you've taken a couple of these circles in this direction, go ahead and reverse the direction here. Be mindful that you're not feeling anything kind of jammy or jamming up into that hip socket. All right, last circle here. And then from here, you're going to take that left knee, let it cross the right side of the body. And notice I have my hand on my knee. Now this side for me personally is a lot more tight, so I don't even get my left shoulder to connect to the floor. So I am not going to straighten this leg. You can come out and straighten if you'd like, but I'm just going to hold it right where it is. Gently feel that hip drop away from the ribs, that left hip drop away from the bottom of my left ribs. And as I begin to relax and release any unnecessary tension within my body, I can feel my left shoulder begin to make contact with the floor. I feel that stretch in the outer left hip and glute start to get in a little deeper into that hip socket itself. And so all this visualization is very helpful, and that is why I really emphasize visualizing, thinking about what we're stretching. And it doesn't have to, excuse me, necessarily be anatomical, right? You can just kind of imagine what it would look like. Okay, one more breath here. And then slowly release whatever twist you have. Come on back onto your back. And then we'll slowly place those feet flat onto the mat here for a moment. And then go ahead and come back into the hip circles. Notice how those feel in comparison to that first round that we did. Excuse me. And then reverse those circles. One more here. And then finally, we're going to take a little bit of just a relaxation in this position. But what I'd like is to see how it would feel to bring soles of the feet together, knees apart, and let the legs open. Now, as I said before, that we didn't really need any props, right? But if you're going to give yourself, 5 to 7 minutes in this position, I would place either yoga blocks or some pillows directly underneath of your outer thighs so that when you open the thighs, you have some support and your legs just aren't hanging out here in space. And what that does is it just softens the pull of the groin and the inner thigh, and it allows your body to open up without, kind of that unsupported, in that unsupported way. The more your body feels supported, the more likely it is to release and to let go. So just taking about 5 minutes here. Your hands can rest wherever's comfortable, whether it be on the pelvis or by your side. As you explore in this opening and in this stretch, if for any reason this causes discomfort in your outer hips, if it causes more contraction or more stress in your outer hips than you were expecting it to, you can always bring the feet together, walk the feet wider, and then let the knees come in. So you're kind of in this knock knee position here. Both are opposite, right? But because we just did some of the stretching and opening in the outer hip, I wanted to allow for a little compression, a shortening of that muscle, if you will, so that we could open the other side of the leg, because sometimes tension in that inner or outer hip could be a pull from the inner groin and thigh. But as you settle here for the next several minutes, just make sure that you have a position and a shape in your body that feels comfortable for you.
And then find that fluid breath. The breath isn't just about the belly or the abdomen or the diaphragm. The breath is a very powerful tool that you can use to send to the areas of pain or discomfort within your body, paired with things like visualization or using your imagination to fill those spaces with energy and breath. Has a profound way of helping to eliminate or at least decrease pain within the body. Remaining here for another 2 to 3 breaths. And no matter where you took the legs, go ahead and just slowly draw them into your chest. And if you'd like, you can give yourself a little rock side to side. And then just rolling over onto one side for a moment here. Just soften, relax. Now with this video, with this little guided hip opening, this is kind of a precursor to some deeper stretches that I know that you have in your repertoire. So precursor to that half pigeon, to a hamstring stretch, maybe even to a hip flexor opener. So such as a lunge, so a kneeling lunge, of course. So if you have time to do that after this video, I highly encourage it. All right, I hope